had always known my father's love was conditional. When my mother passed away, he barely mourned her. Within a year, he had taken a new mate, a woman from a powerful alpha bloodline. And with her came Sebastian, her son from a previous marriage. He was never truly my brother. But to my father, bloodline meant nothing as long as it served his ambitions. And now, years later, he was proving it once again. You will marry Sebastian. The words struck like a blade straight to my chest. I sat frozen in front of my father's desk, my hands clenched tightly in my lap, waiting for him to laugh, to tell me this was some cruel joke. He didn't. What? My voice trembled. Lord Magnus barely looked up from the parchment he was signing, his expression carved from stone. The marriage has been decided. You will be bound to Sebastian by the next full moon. Blood pounded in my ears. Sebastian isn't. I cut myself off, my throat tightening. He's not my real brother. He's just the son of your new wife. My father's voice was cold. And he has no direct blood relation to you. That makes this marriage convenient. Convenient. That was all I had ever been to him. I turned sharply to Sebastian, my heart racing. He stood off to the side, arms crossed, his expression unreadable, calm, unaffected. I clung desperately to one last hope. Say something. Tell him this is insane. Sebastian met my gaze, his dark eyes betraying nothing. Why should I? The breath left my lungs. I felt like I was sinking, drowning in something heavy and inescapable. You're serious? I whispered. Lord Magnus sighed, as if I were nothing more than a petulant child. And Omega serves his family. You should be grateful I'm keeping you within the bloodline. Grateful. The word burned through me. My hands curled into fists at my sides. He was taking my life and calling it mercy. You think I'll just accept this? I spat. Lord Magnus' voice was cold and final. You have no choice. Silence strangled the room like a noose. I turned back to Sebastian one last time. You're really going to let this happen? Sebastian didn't hesitate. Yes. I caught up to Sebastian just as he stepped out of our father's chambers, his pace steady, unbothered. Why didn't you refuse? My voice was sharp, breathless. Sebastian didn't stop walking. Because there was no point. No point. The words rattled inside my skull, making my blood boil. I reached out, grabbing his wrist and yanking him to a stop. No point. My grip tightened. You agreed to this. You didn't even try. Sebastian turned to face me, his dark gaze meeting mine with infuriating calm. Would it have changed anything? The question punched the air from my lungs. I wanted to say yes, that if he had fought back, if he had stood beside me, we could have stopped this. But I couldn't, because we both knew the answer. Anger burned through my veins. You could have at least pretended to protest. Sebastian tilted his head slightly, studying me with the same detached expression he always wore. Why? One word. One simple, infuriating word that sent my mind spiraling. I had no response. Sebastian pulled free from my grip, stepping past me without another glance. I stood frozen, trembling, watching his figure disappear down the dimly lit hall. I didn't understand, and that terrified me more than anything. I moved through the halls like a shadow, heart hammering with every step. The manor was silent, the torches burning low. If I timed it right, I could slip past the outer guards, make it to the stables, and disappear before anyone noticed. Just a little farther. The cold night air brushed against my skin as I reached the side gate. My fingers barely grazed the iron handle when a rough hand clamped down on my arm. Going somewhere, little Omega? My stomach dropped. I thrashed instantly, twisting against the grip, but it was useless. The guards were alphas, stronger, faster, unyielding. Within moments, I was being dragged back inside, my heels scraping against the stone. No, let me go. I kicked out, struggled, but their hands only tightened. My breath came in ragged gasps as I was hauled through the halls like a disobedient pet. The doors to my father's study loomed ahead, tall and unforgiving. The guards shoved them open and forced me to my knees on the cold floor. Lord Magnus barely looked up from his desk. "Disgraceful," he said, his voice as sharp and unforgiving as steel. My breaths were uneven, my pulse wild, but I lifted my chin, refusing to cower. A mistake. Pain flared across my skin, sudden and searing, a harsh reminder of my place. I clenched my jaw, swallowing down the sound that threatened to escape. It wasn't the first time. Through the haze, my gaze found Sebastian. He stood near the wall, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He didn't move, didn't look away, didn't stop it. I wanted to hate him for that. The silence stretched until my father's voice cut through it. "Try it again," he said, his tone almost bored. "And I won't be so forgiving." The guards released me, and I collapsed onto my hands, breath shuddering. The study doors shut behind them, sealing me inside my own failure. Pain throbbed deep in my bones, but my mind was sharper than ever. I wouldn't stop. I wouldn't break. And next time, I wouldn't get caught. I stumbled back to my room, every step a reminder of my failure. My body ached, but the worst wound was the one Sebastian had left, the one of silence. When the door closed behind me, I barely had time to breathe before it opened again. Sebastian. His tall frame filled the doorway, arms crossed, his alpha presence suffocating the space between us. "What do you want?" My voice was hoarse, but I forced strength into it. "Come to make sure I learned my lesson?" Sebastian didn't answer. His dark eyes swept over me, unreadable as always. I let out a bitter laugh. "You really are just like him." That made him pause. I took a step forward, heat rising in my chest. "You stand there watching, doing nothing, just like him. You could have stopped it." I clenched my fists. "But you didn't, did you?" Sebastian's gaze flickered, but only for a second. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. I let out a shaky breath, anger twisting into something I couldn't name. If he didn't care, if he was really just like our father, then why hadn't he reported my escape before I was caught? The grand hall was filled with alphas and betas, their voices a low murmur of speculation. I stood near the front, stiff and silent, every instinct screaming at me to run. Lord Magnus raised a hand, and the room fell into hushed obedience. The union between my son, Elijah, and his brother, Sebastian, has been decided. His voice carried, firm and final. In 1 week, they will be bound before the pack. The air seemed to thin around me. I felt the weight of 100 gazes, assessing, judging. Omegas weren't meant to resist. They were meant to submit. A hand brushed my lower back. Sebastian, standing at my side. The touch was barely there, but it sent a shiver down my spine. Whether it was meant as a warning or something else, I couldn't tell. I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms. 1 week. I had 1 week to find a way out. I tried again. This time, I avoided the main halls, slipping through servant passages and shadowed corridors. I mapped every exit, timed the guards' patrols, memorized the quietest steps on the wooden floors. But no matter what I did, someone was always there. The moment I reached a door locked, the second I found an unguarded hallway, a beta servant appeared, accidentally blocking my way. Even the windows, my last resort, had been reinforced overnight. Someone knew, and they were making sure I stayed exactly where I was. I stood in the dim candlelight of my room, heart hammering, breathing fast. There were only a handful of people with the authority to control the estate like this. My father. I turned toward the door, pulse roaring in my ears. Sebastian. I paced my room, rage simmering beneath my skin. Every exit blocked, every move anticipated. A knock at the door. Before I could tell them to leave, it opened. Sebastian stepped inside, closing it behind him. I tensed. "Here to gloat," he exhaled, slow and measured. "You need to stop." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Stop? You mean stop trying to be free?" Sebastian didn't rise to the bait. He studied me, his expression unreadable, but there was something, just a flicker of something, in his eyes. "You won't win this fight, Elijah." The way he said it, it wasn't a threat. It wasn't mocking. Sounded almost regretful. I clenched my jaw. Watch me. Sebastian held my gaze for a long moment. Then, without another word, he turned and left. The door clicked shut, and for the first time, doubt crept into my mind. Was he warning me out of obedience? Or was he trying to protect me? I sat near the window, staring at the locked latch, my mind racing. I needed a new plan, one that accounted for whoever was sabotaging me. A quiet knock pulled me from my thoughts. I turned as an older Omega, Miriam, stepped inside with a tray of tea. She had been in the estate for years, long before I was born. Her presence was usually ignored by the alphas in the house. "Drink," she murmured, setting the cup down. I didn't move. "You don't have to serve me." Miriam gave a small smile. "And yet, here I am." She turned to leave, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew something, that she had seen far more than she let on. Before she reached the door, I spoke. "It's him, isn't it?" Miriam paused, hands folding in front of her. I swallowed. "Sebastian. He's the one keeping me trapped." She was quiet for a long time. Then, with a glance toward the hall, she said softly, "Not everything is as it seems, young one." And then she was gone. I stared after her, her words looping in my mind. If Sebastian wasn't doing this out of cruelty, then why? The gathering was suffocating. Dozens of alphas and betas filled the grand hall, drinking, talking, discussing politics. I stood near the edge of the room, trying to ignore the weight of their gazes. To them, I was nothing more than an inconvenience. An Omega who should be grateful for the fate my father had chosen for me. A sneering voice cut through the noise. "So this is the Omega causing all the trouble." I turned sharply. A tall alpha, broad and overconfident, stood too close, looking me up and down like I was something weak, something lesser. "Maybe you just need the right hand to guide you," he mused, smirking. "A real alpha." His words cut off. Sebastian was there. I hadn't even seen him move, but suddenly he was between us, one hand resting on the hilt of his belt knife. His stance was calm, but there was an unmistakable warning in his presence. The other alpha hesitated. Then, with a scoff, he stepped back. "Didn't realize you were so protective of your new pet." Sebastian said nothing. He didn't have to. The weight of his stare alone was enough to make the alpha retreat. When it was over, Sebastian turned to me. "Are you hurt?" The question threw me off. I expected silence, indifference, not that. I forced my expression into a glare. "I don't need your help." Sebastian held my gaze for a long moment, then simply walked away. My heart pounded. Why had he done that? Sebastian's actions didn't make sense. If he was just following our father's orders, why had he stepped in tonight? Why had he stopped that alpha from humiliating me? He hadn't defended me like a mate claiming their bond. He hadn't asserted dominance, hadn't used it as an excuse to remind me of my place. He had simply ended the situation. I watched him from across the hall, where he stood speaking with other alphas. He was unreadable as always, his posture composed, his expression calm, but the memory of his voice lingered. "Are you hurt?" It had been genuine. I clenched my fists. If he cared even a little, then why was he keeping me here? Why wasn't he fighting this marriage? I was missing something, and I needed to find out what. I locked the door behind me, exhaling sharply. My body ached from standing through hours of forced politeness, enduring the lingering stares of alphas who saw me as nothing more than property to be traded. I wanted to collapse onto my bed and shut everything out. But something was wrong. A folded piece of parchment sat on my pillow, stark against the dark sheets. My pulse jumped. Slowly, I crossed the room, my fingers hesitant as I picked it up. The paper was rough under my touch, the ink still fresh, as if someone had placed it there only moments ago. I unfolded it, my breath catching as my eyes skimmed the message. "Don't trust anyone." That was it. No name, no signature. I turned sharply, scanning the dimly lit room. The door had been locked behind me. No servants had entered. The windows were closed. The fireplace crackled softly, casting flickering shadows along the walls. Someone had been here. Someone had slipped into my space, left this warning, and vanished before I arrived. A chill crept up my spine. I read the words again, my fingers tightening around the paper. Who had written this? More importantly, who couldn't I trust? I hadn't planned to stop. I was walking past my father's study when I heard it. His voice, sharp with barely contained rage. You overstepped, Sebastian. I froze, pressing myself against the cold stone wall. I listened. Sebastian's voice came next, steady but firm. I did what was necessary. There was a pause, then a low, bitter chuckle from my father. Necessary? You think disobeying me is necessary? A chair scraped against the floor. I could picture it. Lord Magnus standing now, towering over Sebastian, his presence suffocating. You forget your place? My father continued, voice deadly quiet. I gave you an order and you. I handled it. Sebastian interrupted. Handled what? My fingers curled against the wall. My father wasn't the type to let things slide. If Sebastian had truly disobeyed him, there would be consequences. But more than that, Sebastian had done something without telling him. Something behind his back. The realization sent a shiver through me. What was Sebastian hiding? And more importantly, had he done it for me? I barely had time to step back before the study door swung open. Sebastian stood in the doorway. I went rigid, pulse hammering. His gaze flicked down the hall, then back to me. His expression didn't change. He wasn't surprised. Of course, he wasn't. You shouldn't be here, he said evenly. I lifted my chin, forcing my voice to stay steady. Neither should you. Disobeying father, was it? His jaw tensed slightly, but he didn't bite. He didn't demand an explanation. Didn't drag me to our father for punishment. He just looked at me for a long, heavy moment before speaking. Be careful, Elijah. The words sent an unexpected chill down my spine. I wanted to ask, careful of what? Of who? But before I could, Sebastian stepped past me, disappearing down the hall. I stood frozen in place, heart pounding. Sebastian never wasted words. If he said something, it meant something. And that warning, it wasn't about him. It was about something bigger. I needed to know where Sebastian stood. If he was truly my father's pawn, he would prove it. And if he wasn't, I had to understand why. At breakfast, I made my move. The grand dining hall was filled with alphas and betas, all seated in their rightful places. I was expected to sit quietly, to eat without drawing attention. I did the opposite. I reached for the silver pitcher of wine, meant only for alphas, and poured myself a glass. The room went still. A low murmur of disapproval rippled through the table. Lord Magnus' gaze snapped to me, cold and piercing. Elijah, he said, voice dangerously calm. What do you think you're doing? I met his stare and took a slow sip. Drinking. Silence. To defy an alpha openly was unthinkable. An Omega had no right to challenge his authority. This wasn't just rebellion, it was a direct test. Sebastian was seated across from me, expression unreadable. Would he call me out? Would he tell our father I needed to be corrected? The tension stretched. And then, Sebastian picked up his own glass and drank. He didn't say a word, didn't look at me, didn't give our father a single excuse to react. Lord Magnus' lip curled in disdain, but he said nothing. The moment passed. The conversation resumed. I set my glass down, heart racing. Sebastian hadn't stopped me. He hadn't protected me either. But he had let it happen. Why? I moved fast. This time, I didn't hesitate. No careful planning, no second-guessing, I simply acted. Through the servants' corridor. Down the back stairs. Out the side entrance where the guards were least alert. The cold air hit my skin as I slipped into the courtyard. My pulse hammering. Just a little farther. If I could reach the tree line, I could disappear. I was almost there. And then, you're getting predictable. I froze. Sebastian leaned against a stone pillar, arms crossed, his dark eyes fixed on me. He had been waiting. I swallowed hard, bracing for him to drag me back inside, to tell our father, to ensure I learned my place. But he didn't move. He didn't stop me. He just stood there, watching, waiting. Seconds stretched. My breath came fast and shallow. I could still run, but something in his expression held me in place. Sebastian exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. Then, with nothing more than a quiet, unreadable look, he turned and walked away. He left me there. He let me go. I stood frozen in place, my escape forgotten, my mind racing with one question. The tension in the great hall was suffocating. I stood beside Sebastian, forced to endure yet another political gathering, another moment of pretending I wasn't trapped. But the atmosphere shifted the moment he walked in. A towering alpha, dressed in deep crimson, his golden eyes scanning the room like a predator. Lord Magnus greeted him with a nod. Alpha Dorian, you've come a long way. Dorian's gaze landed on me, and I hated the way he studied me, like I was something to be acquired. I came for what was promised, he said smoothly. The Omega. The room felt colder. I stiffened. Promised? My eyes darted to my father, but he remained expressionless. Sebastian, however, tensed beside me. Lord Magnus spoke calmly. The arrangement has changed. Dorian's smile didn't reach his eyes. Has it? His attention flicked between Sebastian and me, realization dawning. Then he laughed. You'd rather keep him in the family? How noble. His voice dripped with mockery. But let's be honest. An Omega like that deserves a stronger mate. I clenched my fists. Sebastian didn't react. He didn't rise to the bait. He just stood there, silent and unreadable. But the air between him and Dorian crackled with something dangerous. I wasn't sure what scared me more, Dorian's claim over me, or the way Sebastian looked like he was ready to rip out his throat. The moment we were alone, I turned on Sebastian. You knew? I hissed. Sebastian didn't pretend to misunderstand. He simply met my glare, his expression calm as ever. Dorian, I snapped. Father was going to give me to him, wasn't he? Sebastian didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth had already sunk in, cold and heavy. The engagement, the sudden announcement. Sebastian hadn't agreed to this marriage out of loyalty to our father. He had done it to stop something worse. My stomach twisted. Why? Sebastian's eyes darkened. You already know why. I hated that he was right. I had fought him at every turn, convinced he was just another version of our father. But the truth was far more complicated. Sebastian wasn't keeping me for himself. He was keeping me out of someone else's hands. And I didn't know if that made me feel safer, or more trapped than ever. I paced the length of my room, my thoughts tangled. So that's it? You married me out of pity? Sebastian exhaled, slow and measured. No. Then why? I demanded. Why not let father send me off to Dorian? It would have been easier for you. Sebastian's jaw tightened. Because he would have broken you. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I swallowed hard. And you care about that why? Sebastian finally looked at me, and for the first time his expression cracked, just slightly. A flicker of something raw beneath the surface. I had a choice, he said quietly. Let him have you or keep you here. His voice dropped lower. I chose the lesser evil. I stared at him, my pulse unsteady. All this time, I thought Sebastian was another cage, another force keeping me trapped. But now I wasn't so sure, because if he had wanted to control me, he wouldn't have given me that truth. He wouldn't have let me see that he'd gone against our father for my sake. And that terrified me more than anything. I let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. You chose the lesser evil? I repeated, my voice shaking. And I was just supposed to be grateful? Sebastian didn't respond. He just watched me, steady and unreadable as ever. My chest tightened. You had no right to make that decision for me. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. A slight tension in his shoulders. I did what had to be done. My fists clenched. No, you did what you decided was best. You're no better than father. That landed. A flicker of something passed through his eyes, gone too fast to catch. But I didn't stop. You think this is different? That just because you stopped one monster, it makes you any less of a cage. My breath came fast and shallow. You still took away my choice. Sebastian was silent, and that infuriated me more than anything. I turned away, my pulse roaring in my ears. Couldn't look at him. Couldn't stand the way he acted like he had saved me when all he had done was trap me differently. I never asked to be saved, and I sure as hell wasn't going to thank him for it. I barely made it 3 steps out of my room before 2 guards stepped into my path, blocking the hallway. "By order of Lord Magnus," one of them said, his tone devoid of emotion. "You are to remain in your chambers until the ceremony." The words sank in slowly. I glanced between them, heart hammering. "You're locking me in?" No response. They just stood there, solid and unmoving, as if I weren't worth an explanation. My stomach twisted. Under whose orders? Still nothing. But I already knew. This wasn't Sebastian. This was our father. "You can't do this," I snapped, voice rising. "You can't just keep me here like some prisoner." No reaction. I stepped back, fists clenching, fury clawing its way up my throat. "Move!" Neither guard flinched. Instead, they stepped forward. Not aggressively, just enough to make their message clear. I had no choice. The realization sent a cold wave through me. I had spent weeks trying to fight this, trying to find a way out, only for my father to strip away the last sliver of control I had left. The guards didn't force me back inside. They didn't have to, because what else could I do? Slowly, I turned and stepped back into my room. The door shut behind me with a dull finality. A heavy click of the lock followed. I exhaled sharply, pressing my palms against the wooden surface. Trapped. Again. But this time something was different. Because now I knew why I was here. Now I knew what had been planned for me. And I would not let them decide my fate. The hours stretched long. I paced my room, my mind running in circles. No exits. No windows large enough to squeeze through. No guards stupid enough to fall for a distraction. Trapped. Again. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, staring out at the moonlit courtyard below. I could almost taste the freedom, the crisp night air, the wind on my skin, the world beyond these walls. A soft click broke the silence behind me. I whirled around. Sebastian stood just inside the doorway, his broad frame barely illuminated by the dim candlelight. He had slipped in so quietly, I hadn't even heard him coming. I tensed. "Here to make sure I don't embarrass the family again?" Sebastian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he closed the door behind him and leaned against it, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, as always. Then he spoke. "We need to leave." I blinked. "What?" He exhaled, slow and steady. "Tonight, while the estate is still quiet." For a moment, I could only stare at him, trying to process what he was saying. Sebastian, the perfect heir, the son who never disobeyed, the one who stood by while our father dictated my life, was now telling me to run. "You're joking." My voice came out flat. "I'm not." I let out a sharp laugh. "And I'm supposed to believe you suddenly care what happens to me?" Sebastian's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. "You said you wanted a choice," he said quietly. "This is it." I froze. The weight of his words sank into my chest, heavy and unfamiliar. I wanted to escape. I had always wanted to escape. But not like this. Not with him. Sebastian pushed off the door, stepping toward me. "You don't trust me. I get that. But staying here isn't an option anymore." He was right. Lord Magnus had made sure of that. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. This could be another trap. Another way to control me. Or it could be the only chance I had left. Sebastian held out his hand. "Are you coming or not?" My heart pounded. This was it. The moment that would decide everything. I stared at Sebastian's outstretched hand, my pulse pounding in my ears. This was what I wanted. What I had fought for. A chance to escape. So why couldn't I move? I forced my gaze up to his, searching for the trick, the lie, the inevitable betrayal. "Why now?" My voice came out hoarse. "Why are you suddenly helping me?" Sebastian didn't hesitate. Because if we don't leave tonight, Father won't let you go. Ever. I let out a sharp laugh. Oh, and you're so different from him, right? Sebastian's expression didn't change. He simply let his hand drop to his side. You're just like him. I snapped, my chest tightening. You make decisions for me. You decide what's best. You think just because you're helping me now, it erases everything else. I stepped back, shaking my head. I don't need another person controlling my life. Sebastian's jaw tightened. I'm not trying to control you. Then why didn't you tell me sooner? I demanded. Why let me think you were just going along with it? A flicker of something passed through his gaze. Guilt, maybe. It was gone before I could grasp it. I did what I had to, he said finally. Right? I folded my arms. And now I'm supposed to trust you? He exhaled slowly. I didn't come here to argue. I came here to give you a choice. I scoffed. Now you care about giving me choices? Sebastian went quiet. The weight of the silence made my chest ache. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to grab his hand and run, disappear into the night and finally be free. But freedom meant being on my own. And if I left with Sebastian, I wasn't free. I was just bound to someone else's decisions. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. No, his gaze flickered. Elijah. No, I repeated, stepping back. I'm not going anywhere with you. Sebastian studied me for a long moment, unreadable as ever. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. I sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, my breath unsteady. I had won. I had made my choice. So why did it feel like I had just lost something? The study door closed with a heavy thud, sealing off the conversation from the rest of the estate. Lord Magnus sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, his expression unreadable as Alpha Dorian settled into the chair across from him. You should have honored our agreement, Dorian said, his voice smooth but edged with displeasure. The Omega was mine. Magnus exhaled, slow and measured. Circumstances changed. Dorian's eyes darkened. Because of him. The meaning was clear. Sebastian. Dorian leaned forward, a slow smirk curling at the edges of his lips. You and I both know that your eldest son is becoming a liability. He's not as obedient as he once was, is he? Magnus didn't answer, because Dorian was right. Sebastian had defied him, challenged his authority in ways no son of his should. He had stopped Dorian from claiming Elijah, had interfered where he shouldn't have. Remove him from the equation, Dorian murmured, and our original deal stands. Elijah will be mine, and your family will gain everything I promised. Magnus tapped his fingers against the wood, considering. And in return? Dorian's smirk widened. I take care of your problem. Silence. Then slowly, Lord Magnus nodded. The deal was made. Sebastian wouldn't see the next full moon, and Elijah would never escape. The night was eerily still. I lay awake in my room, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts tangled. The argument with Sebastian replayed in my head over and over again. The way he had looked at me, the way I had rejected him. I told myself I had done the right thing. Then, a distant clang, a muffled shout. I shot upright. That wasn't normal. That was another sound, a struggle. I ran to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. Heavy footsteps, low voices, too many. Something was wrong. I backed away, my heartbeat hammering in my chest. Then, a sharp crash from somewhere down the hall. A voice, deep, furious. Sebastian. I didn't think. I moved. Fumbling with the lock, I forced the door open and ran, feet barely touching the ground as I raced toward the sound. I turned the corner and froze. Sebastian stood at the center of the hall, shirt torn, a knife gripped in his hand. 3 men circled him. Alphas, their postures tense, their weapons drawn. Assassins. The realization slammed into me. Father sent them. Sebastian was outnumbered, but his stance remained firm. He was strong, I knew that, but 3 against 1. Even for him, that was a death sentence. One of the assassins lunged. Sebastian deflected, but another came at his back. His blade caught flesh, but a fist met his ribs in return. I took a shaky step forward, my breath short. I could turn around, pretend I saw nothing. Sebastian had always been the stronger one, the one who stood in silence while I suffered. I owed him nothing, but I thought of the locked doors, the ignored escape attempts, the quiet ways he had let me fight back. I thought of the outstretched hand, the choice he had finally given me. And I knew I had a choice now, too. I could let him die, or I could save him. My fists clenched. My decision was made. I ran straight toward the fight. The night air was cold against my skin, but I barely felt it. My breath came fast, my pulse still pounding from the fight, from the escape, from everything. We had made it. Sebastian stood a few steps away, his chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. Blood stained his knuckles, his torn shirt revealing bruises already forming. And yet, his eyes, dark, unwavering, were locked onto me. I swallowed hard. My voice caught, but I forced the words out. Why? Sebastian exhaled, slow and steady. Why do you think? I shook my head. Tell me. He was silent for a long moment. Then, his voice dropped to something raw, something unguarded. I've loved you for a long time, Elijah. The words hit harder than any of my father's punishments ever had. My breath caught. Sebastian took a step closer. I didn't want this marriage because of duty. I accepted it because I couldn't stand the thought of you in another alpha's hands. His gaze flickered with something fierce, something possessive, but not like father's. Not like Dorian's. It wasn't about power. It wasn't about control. It was me. I didn't realize I was trembling until Sebastian reached for me, pulling me in before I could protest. His hands slid behind my neck, steady and warm, grounding me. Then, he kissed me. The world tilted. My mind screamed that this was wrong, that this was forbidden, that we had spent our lives fighting each other. But my body betrayed me, because I didn't pull away. Sebastian was careful, giving me the chance to refuse, to push him back. But I couldn't, because for the first time I understood. This wasn't about ownership. It never had been. Sebastian had given me a choice. And for the first time I was making mine. When he finally pulled away, his forehead rested against mine, his breath warm against my lips. Run away with me, he murmured. Just us. No one else. My chest ached. The future was uncertain. The world would hunt us down. We had no plan, no allies, no guarantees. But when I looked into his eyes, into Sebastian, I knew the answer. I swallowed hard. Yes. A slow, almost disbelieving exhale left his lips. We'll run away together, I whispered, my fingers curling into his torn sleeve. No matter what's ahead. Sebastian's grip tightened. I swear, I'll protect you with my life. And for the first time, I believed him. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any new content.